This episode of the Chris Johnston Show is brought to you by Sports Interaction. Sports Interaction is your homegrown sports book where local takes on an entirely different meaning, focusing on the teams, games, and players that matter to you. Sports Interaction is on the ground, on top of all the local trends, and offering prop bets that you'd never even imagined existed, from same-game parlays to a best-in-class casino featuring thousands of games and live 24/7 dealers. And now introducing the Locker Room, the first of its kind in Canada, a live watch party for the biggest games of the week. Sports Interaction, your homegrown sportsbook. Go to sportsinteraction.com/SDPN to open an account. Bet local. 19 plus. Please play responsibly. And if you have questions or concerns about gambling or the gambling of someone close to you, please go to connexontario.ca.
I know that some in our audience know the finer points of hockey.
The Chris Johnston Show.
We are your friends.
The biggest stories, bringing you inside the game.
What did you hear? Powered by Sports Interaction, your homegrown sportsbook. Always remember to bet local.
Here's Chris with your host, Julian McKenzie.
Part of the game.
Another Monday show. CJ is live from Seattle for the NHL Board of Governors meeting. How is Seattle? Hopefully you're not sleepless. There's a movie about that stuff, right?
No, I've only been here 12 hours and 9 of them I spent sleeping. So certainly I'm the opposite of sleepless in Seattle. I got in late yesterday, went for a little run along the waterfront, had a dinner and called it a night. And here we are first thing in the morning.
All right. So rested in Seattle does not have the same ring as sleepless. We'll workshop that. It is Ask CJ Day, so we'll get to your questions. We will take from the pool of questions that were dished out in the Ask CJ mailbag, which you can read at The Athletic. Congratulations on getting your own Ask CJ column at The Athletic.
It was fun. There's a lot of questions. They have a limits on how many words you can have in your response. So I didn't get to nearly all the questions just because there's word limits and the like.
Of course. But first, why not talk about some trade stuff? Let's talk about a trade that already happened, and let's see if other teams may want to make some trades in the foreseeable future. The trade I'm thinking of here, the Calgary Flames shipping off Nikita Zadorov in the last few days to Vancouver. He gets traded just hours before a game, and then 2 days later, Nikita Zadorov with the Vancouver Canucks plays against his former team. I know I've provided some analysis on it for The Athletic. I'd love to know your thoughts on how that all went down.
Well, quite an interesting scenario. I remember years ago, I think Matt Duchene, when he was traded either from Ottawa to Columbus or maybe it was Colorado to Ottawa. Anyway, one of his trades, I remember he walked down the hall and played a game immediately against his former team. But that's pretty unique. And of course, it's given us this Zadorov-Tyler Myers pairing, which is pretty unique given how big those two gentlemen are. Really intriguing. The Canucks, as we've talked about, are off to such a great start to this season. Obviously, they're feeling very bullish on, where things could go for them this year, and they've been looking to upgrade their blue line for some time now. And the pieces fell together to execute a trade, a little sooner than we thought. I think actually in the last show, Julian, we were going through the merits of do you make a quick trade if you're in Craig Conroy's shoes? Do you wait it out? One of the points I think is still salient is you might end up making 4 or 5 trades this year. So just from a functional standpoint, you don't want to leave that to the last day, right before the trade deadline, I would expect. And, with Nikita Zadorov having already asked his way out through agent Dan Milstein, with the fact that Canucks were pretty motivated to get a deal done, I think that everything was able to fall into place there. And you got to see him wear number 91 for the Canucks on Saturday not long after finishing his Flames career.
Yeah, I'll say this. For a lot of people wondering, okay, well, why would the Flames even do this so soon? It seems as if there was an opportunity for them to clear some cap space right away. My understanding, I had a nice conversation with Puckpedia a couple days ago. Their daily cap hit is below the ACSL limit, so I think they're able to accrue cap space, not the same level as another team that isn't using LTIR, because the Flames are using LTIR, but they're still able to accrue some kind of cap space going forward. Plus, they're able to call up younger players from the AHL without as much stress as it would be before the Zadorov trade. They were able to call up Ilya Slovyov from the AHL right after. He didn't play against the Vancouver Canucks, but the team feels as if like he could be able to at least get some minutes at that bottom pairing role as well. There's some logistics that work out in their favor. They didn't retain salary either, so they didn't have to use any of their retention spots. Okay, the more I thought about it, the more I thought, okay, there's some good points to this trade happening now, but definitely there's still a section of fans who are wondering what they could have gotten for Nikita Zadorov if they had waited at the deadline. I don't think he was going to go for a first. There are some people who are convinced that he could have got them a first or a high return. This is a third pairing defenseman at the end of the day, right? Like he's talented, he can skate, but he's a third pairing guy. Like I think people should remember that at least.
Right. And look, he's been traded a few times in his career already. I think that you can see probably what his value is through those deals. That that is a reflection of what the league thinks of him. It's a good debate though, because the truth is we don't know, and there is possibly a world where you get to late February or the first week of March, and there's just not a lot of other quality defensemen out there. He ends up in very high demand. Maybe more teams can fit his salary in at that point. I mean, that was one of the things that pushed him to Vancouver here is, a team like the Toronto Maple Leafs, for example, couldn't have made this trade without some sort of salary gymnastics, whether that was, retained salary or maybe them sending back some sort of contract. Anyway, I mean, it was the cleanest deal was there to be made with the Canucks because you just get the 2 draft picks. You don't have to worry about salary retention spots and the like. So, and you get them off the books now. And I think you open up your opportunities, as you say, it's for the younger players. And, I could see the Flames being like chaos agents this year a little bit. Like, you probably saw over the weekend that Tyson Barrie has permission now to speak to teams. He was a scratch in Nashville. Things just haven't really worked out there. He just wants an opportunity to play. There's no personality conflict per se, but he just isn't in their plans as much as he'd like to be right now. And he's in a pending UFA year. Like, I wonder if Calgary could be a fit for him. If only because I look at the Flames power play, which has struggled this year. And obviously one of the things Tyson Barrie does best is quarterback a power play. And, I think that there could be the need for bodies in Calgary, depending on, the timing of other moves that are to be made. And so I think you should keep an eye out for them in those talks. New Jersey's looking for a defenseman right now that they're dealing with a whole raft of injuries on their blue line. I think they're a possibility for Barrie. And so maybe we're starting to see some movement. I mean, I usually I feel like in December, I'm usually like, everyone calm down. I know we want to make all the trades, but look at history. They don't usually come, but maybe the circumstances will be a little different this year because it does seem as though there is a little bit of action heating up here around the league.
We have the Chaos Giraffes in Vancouver, and we have the Chaos Short Kings on the CJ show.
I love it. I love it. You're back among us.
Yeah,
the sub 5'9" group.
Yeah, I maybe I never really left. What about the Leafs though? You did mention the fact that perhaps there was some. Zadorov was linked to the Toronto Maple Leafs at one point.
And with good reason. They like the player,
yes, of course,
and they're looking to bolster their blue line as well.
Exactly. They've been linked to Chris Tanev too, and he could still move. Who knows? But I mean, it doesn't change the fact that the Leafs still need some kind of defensive help. What are they saying?
Well, I think that the search continues. Look, that they're capped out to a certain degree. I'm not aware of if they've gotten the full clarity on John Klingberg yet, if he's done for the year, if he's going to have surgical procedure or not. But that was expected any day now, and so that might at least make the runway for any financial decisions a little cleaner and clearer for them. I think that they're also at a spot where it's funny, like the CJ show chat is madness with all the Leaf fans in there. But I think it's reflective of what's happening more broadly in the fan base too. Like, you think that people are talking about this team like they've lost like 10 of 11. And instead they're down multiple defensemen due to injuries. They're patching it together in a way with the team you wouldn't necessarily expect. Ilya Samsonov really hasn't performed as they would hope this year. And yet they're still putting together victories more often than not, and just come through in November where they certainly had a pretty good record. So I think that they're internally still looking at the other options out there, Julian. I think that they're pretty pleased with where they're at and maybe where some of the underlying parts of their game are trending. I think defensively that they feel that they're giving up a lot less than they had been. Say in this last stretch of games, they're coming off a pretty good game Saturday night. They lost in overtime to Boston, but again, I know the way they are looking at that as a team is how they're encouraged by how they played. They think it might have been one of their best games, if not their best game of the year. So I don't know that the urgency is necessarily there, but obviously they would make a move if there was one to make. And I think ultimately what we should expect with the Leafs is this might not be a year where they're unloading multiple draft picks and first rounders and stuff like that for rental players. That's what happened last year. Predominantly, I mean, they did get Jake McCabe and Sam Lafferty on deals that extended beyond the season. But if you remember, they, spent a lot of capital in adding Noel Achari and Ryan O'Reilly, making the moves they did, Eric Gustafson and the like. And, I think that maybe they don't want to be in the rental game quite as much. And so if you end up talking about a Chris Tanev trade ever takes fruition, I wonder if that comes with some sort of extension for the player. I mean, I think the Leafs feel like they're getting by just fine is kind of the idea here. They know they're not a perfect team. They know that they need to make upgrades, but they still have 3 months, as do all teams, to do it before the trade deadline passes. So I don't think that they necessarily are scouring the market today to make a big deal. And if anything, they're looking forward to getting a little healthier here with Timothy Liljegren working his way back from his high ankle sprain. And, it seems as though they maybe turned a corner where some of the injury news is turning a little bit more positive for them.
That's a lot of positive stuff, because I was just about to say, and I wasn't trying to do this to be malicious, I still can't believe the San Jose Sharks have more regulation wins than the Toronto Maple Leafs do. That doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't, but I'm really mixed on this. Like this stat is like taking on a life of its own a little bit around this team. Like, obviously, I just don't know if it matters yet. I guess that's what I'm saying. I'm willing to say that it might matter, but they're still winning games. They've come back a lot this year. Like, I guess in a perfect world, you want to win every game like 4-1. You want it to be comfortable. You don't want to give up much on your penalty kill. You want everything, but we don't live in that world, right? I mean, and I'm not saying it doesn't matter, because maybe this is the ultimate house of cards. Maybe that's what it tells you. But to me, they've just been such a good team for such a long time. Again, they've had injuries and things that they've gone through. Like, I don't think they've played that well, but isn't it good news when you have a good team? Like, I think the reverse is true too. Like, if you see a team that hasn't proven itself yet and they have like this hot start and there's all these sort of troubling signs, you're like, well, this might not be real. I mean, I think we've seen enough of this core of the Leafs to know that they're a 110-point team almost every year. There's questions about how they perform in the playoffs. I think that'll be a big part of what we focus on as things go on. But I don't know that the regulation wins stat is like this harbinger of like chaos to come, negative things ahead. But look, I'll put my hand up and say I'm wrong if in February they're completely in the ditch and everyone's like, I told you so. That was just smoke and mirrors at the start of the year. I think more than likely it's taking away from how much they've managed to get through and put points in the bank when they haven't been at their best, and they still got lots of time to get towards their best.
Very well said. And also February. Let's get to Christmas first.
Well, but like, what have they won in the last week? I don't have their record in front of me. Have they won? Are they like 4-1-1 in their last 6 games or something? Like, I don't know. I feel like some of the hysteria is a little overblown this year. But that's the market. That's the team. That's the fan base. We're here on the Steve Dangle Podcast Network, which was built on the tears of Leaf fans. So, who am I to throw too many darts around here? But I do think that it's a little bit oversaid their problems. Again, I'm not saying that they played amazing. That's not the argument. I just think these are proven enough players, and we're not looking at the final version of the team at this point in time. So I'm willing to let this play out more, especially while they are putting points in the bank, even if they're coming in overtime or the shootout.
6-2-2 in their last 10 are the Toronto Maple Leafs. So they happen 60%.
Yeah, wouldn't we all love to fail at 6-2-2?
Yeah, when we all love a 60%. Maybe not me. I probably would rather an 80%.
Well, I'm not talking about school. I'm talking about in sports.
That's it's cool. Yeah.
In sports, if you're winning 60% of your games, you're a pretty damn good team in any of the sports.
Exactly.
You know who's winning more than that though? The Dallas Cowboys.
Oh, good for you. Good for you guys.
The Dallas
That's
Cowboys are
awesome.
winning more than 60% of the games, my friend.
That is really good. And that is a great time for us to go to Sports Interaction and continue with the rest of the show on the other side of our break. Welcome to You Can Bet That. Remember to hit up sportsinteraction.com/SDPN for all of your gaming needs. Next NHL head coach to be fired. It's not always fun when that happens. DJ Smith is the betting favorite according to Sports Interaction. Odds are 3-1. Lane Lambert in New York at 6-1. Craig Berube in St. Louis at 7-1. Lindy Ruff is also on this list at 8-1. David Quinn with San Jose at 9-1 as well. You can find the full list on the Sports Interaction website. What say you about that list?
Well, can we first acknowledge what a crazy profession being an NHL head coach is? Because the fact that these lists even exist, and you can basically, it's like you can set your watch to it. Actually, last season, Julian, we didn't see much in the way of in-season coaching changes, but generally, it's just like it's going to happen to some point. I think it's the average tenure is 2.5 years, and you can see why it happens. Look, John Hines takes over in Minnesota from Dean Evison, and guess what? The Wild go on a winning streak. Chris Knobloch takes over from Jay Woodcroft in Edmonton. They did have a brief down, but then they've just won 4 games in a row, and so you can see why the temptation is there for teams. I don't know if it's just almost like reversion to the mean where those teams were not as bad as they looked, or if it is just the new voice and some new ideas in terms of how to deploy the players. Anyway, that's a long way of saying, I think the pressure is highest in Ottawa among the places you mentioned there. And so it's only natural that DJ's name would be at the top of the list. I really don't get the sense that the management there wants to make a change, but, there was expectations of pushing towards the playoffs. They've just kind of got off to another muddy start. And, I think that you could get to a point where that change is made. So he's probably number one with for good reason on that list. But man, it's a tough job. I think that I can only imagine what it's like operating while these lists exist. You know what I mean? Your family and everyone sees those things. Oy.
Yeah, I can imagine that. Don't forget to check out sportsinteraction.com/SDPN for all the best odds before game, in game, and the best props. sportsinteraction.com/SDPN. This episode of the Chris Johnston Show is brought to you by Factor. This bustling holiday season, you might be looking for nutritious, flavorful, just, meals that'll just save you some time on jam-packed days. Factor is America's #1 ready-to-eat meal delivery service, and they can help you eat well for breakfast, lunch, and dinner with chef-prepared, dietitian-approved, ready-to-eat meals delivered straight to your door. You will save time and stay on track with your healthy lifestyle while tackling all of your holiday to-dos. And I know your to-do lists are going to be long. You can cross meal prepping off of your list this holiday season with Factor. Skip the meal planning, the grocery shopping, the chopping, the prepping, and cleaning up, and get Factor's fresh, never frozen meals delivered to your door. They are ready in just 2 minutes, so literally all you have to do is heat those bad boys up and enjoy them. They're not just for dinner either. You can count on extra convenience any time of the day with an assortment of 55 plus add-ons to suit various preferences and tastes. You can choose from quick breakfast items, lunch to go, grab and go snacks, cold pressed juices, shakes, and smoothies. Factor's got it all. You can head to factormeals.com/Johnston50 and use code Johnston50 to get 50% off. This episode of the Chris Johnston Show is brought to you by SeatGeek. With over 28 million downloads, SeatGeek is the #1 rated ticketing app. There are more than 70,000 events every single day on SeatGeek, including concerts, sports, festivals, and more. The NFL and NHL seasons are in full swing. The NBA as well. They're going through the in-season tournament right now. Quarterfinal games are going on this week. SeatGeek has your tickets to every single game. Plus, if you want to go to concerts, Travis Scott's on tour, Zach Bryan's on tour. A lot of people obviously are going to want Taylor Swift tickets for whenever she goes on tour next. SeatGeek has you covered. They put all the tickets across the web in one place to make sure you're getting a good deal, and each ticket is rated on a scale of 1 to 10, so look for the green dots. Green means good, red means bad, and every ticket is backed by their buyer guarantee. SeatGeek is the only website that lets you return your ticket ahead of the event thanks to swaps. Johnston, is the code you need to get $20 off tickets at SeatGeek. That's $20 off your first purchase with the promo code Johnston. Make sure you click the link in the description to download the app. Siege, before we get to Ask CJ, and before I ask you some questions about you being in Seattle for the NHL Board of Governors meeting, do we have any update on Jack Campbell in Edmonton? We know we've been talking about their goaltending situation for a good chunk of the year. Jack Campbell in Bakersfield right now, 3-4-0-1 with a 3.28 GAA and an 893 save percentage. He did have a shutout a couple of games ago, but the performances have been more or less shaky, to say the least. At least just on paper, looking at these, I haven't been able to watch any of his games that closely. I'm really curious if the plan is still for him to get called up or if the Oilers are going to look elsewhere.
Well, I mean, the numbers aren't encouraging that you mentioned, and it's only really a handful of games. We'll see where that goes. I know there've been internal discussions about bringing Campbell back up to the NHL. I don't know that the plan is to just stick him in Bakersfield indefinitely. Obviously we're hoping though that by sending him down, that it would give him a chance to have a reset and to rediscover his game and his performance, because this is a crazy sport, man. They might still need him at some point, as much as that seems sort of improbable given the start they had, the fact that they've just run him through waivers a year and a half after signing him to a big free agent deal. I don't know that it's going super well. The good news is that at the NHL level, the Oilers are in this weird schedule right now where they're off for basically a week. They actually had time for Connor McDavid. I don't know if you saw this over the weekend, to be in Toronto to get his star unveiled on the Canadian Walk of Fame.
I did see that.
Which is weird, in the middle of a season that you can have a guy, back in his hometown doing that. Congrats, Connor, by the way. But
congrats.
Edmonton did win 4 games in a row right before that break, right? And so I think that does ease some of certainly the pressure on the organization, on the players. It's been a very turbulent start to the year there. And, I don't know where they've landed on Campbell. I mean, again, I know that they got to the point where they're discussing, do we bring him up? But I'm not sure they've executed a decision there just yet. Obviously, he hasn't been recalled, at least as of the time we're recording this. And, maybe the fact that his performances aren't screaming, call up, and they're not in as urgent of a situation as they were, maybe there's a little bit more time here. But, certainly I think the Oilers have continued to look at the goalie market. It's not particularly robust, or it's maybe not full of what I would say options that are like, okay, this is a clear upgrade on what we have. And so that's probably explains why nothing has happened just yet. I know they even explored at one point trading Jack Campbell, but they were going to have to include some pretty big sweeteners in order to have that happen. And so, I think that the easy answer, or the short answer, is that they're looking at their options still, but winning just does buy you that time, right? And so I think that they've got a little bit more time to use it. It should be noted too that since we've recorded, Samuel Montembeault signed a 3-year deal in Montreal. He was a pending UFA goaltender. I don't think the Canadians ever really wanted to trade him, but there was a world maybe where they were going to be forced to consider it if they didn't get his signature on a contract. But now he's locked in. So you wonder about Jake Allen's future when we're looking at goalies that could be moved. He's under contract beyond this year. He has an 18 no trade clause, so he has some say or control over or what's going to happen here for where he goes. But I think that's sort of where we're at. The Oilers obviously would love that. The best case scenario for everyone involved is that Jack Campbell figures it out and returns to form. He's done it before. I'll say that. He's had a long stint in the AHL before kind of rising to prominence in LA a few years ago, and so the hope is he can do it again.
Okay. Now let's get to why you're in Seattle for the NHL BOG. Why are you in Seattle? What do we expect from these meetings? What's so important that you had to fly all the way out to be there?
Well, I mean, this is the meeting where literally they could come out today and say we're expanding. That I don't know how many years ago that was, 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago. I was at one of these meetings. There was no buzz heading in, and literally Gary Bettman calls. I don't know. There's maybe 10 of us there, reporters, calls us into this room, and he's like, "We're expanding to Vegas. They're starting a ticket drive. Like this is the most powerful people in the sport, and they can make they can make big unilateral decisions, or multilateral, I guess, because there has to be a certain quorum among the owners. But I mean, this is where big changes can happen. I think it's interesting that we're in Seattle. The Kraken ownership group actually requested to have the meeting in their own city. They wanted to be able to show the other NHL owners around town, I guess, so to speak, to show off, their city, the newest franchise in the league right now. And so, typically these are held in sunny locales like Florida or California, but here we are, and I'm not complaining because, I mean, let's face it, I'm living in a hotel
Beautiful
either way.
city.
Like, right, for sure. And I should say though, like what this covering this meeting entails is literally standing around a hotel lobby, corralling the people as they walk by. So I could be in the best climate or the worst climate, and as long as the hotel itself has, what I mean, that's all I'm seeing anyway. But yeah, so we're here for that, and I don't know that there's any big news plan, but I would say the fun of this event is the unknown, is that possibility. I mean, it seems to me that, I mean, the commissioner, Gary Bettman's been pretty open about talking about the subject of expansion broadly, like in his more recent availabilities, but it doesn't sound to me like it's coming right now. But it's clearly on their minds to some degree. As Bettman has said, a lot of that's because they've got cities and potential owners coming to them and saying, hey, what about us? Is there anything to be done here? And so I think that they have some of those relationships cooking under the surface, which is maybe making it more appealing. I think the fact that franchise values have gone pretty starkly up and to the right in terms of the value going up, it becomes more appealing. And so, we've got all kinds of situations in the league. We've got, what are they going to do with the draft? Is, maybe mandatory neck guards or protection? Is that going to be discussed here? Obviously, with the Adam Johnson tragedy in Britain, I think there might still be some fallout from the Corey Perry situation to be discussed. One thing I'll be curious to see is, does he need to speak to the commissioner before potentially returning with another team? Not to say that's where his head's at, based on the statement he put out, it seems very much like he's not, at the spot where he wants to play right now anyway. But, I think that'll be discussed. And then the expansion issue, I just think, is always kind of an interesting one, because that it seems crazy that we're already, the NBA is still at 30 teams. I'm sitting in Seattle. I know the NBA it seems like is going to come back to this city at some point in time. But maybe the NHL will push forward and add even more teams before the other leagues are doing that.
Atlanta, Houston, Salt Lake City. There's a couple different U.S. options for them.
Yeah, did you see Salt Lake? It looks like they're going to get a Winter Olympics.
I had heard about that in passing.
Yeah, there was a headline. There was a meeting, I think, somewhere in Europe over the weekend, and it sounds like they're tabbed for the 2034 Olympics, which sounds really far away, but it's only a couple Winter Olympic cycles down the road, and it's hard not to connect dots with the fact you have a very wealthy person there trying, with an interest in the NHL, an open interest. They're I would assume going to have to build a venue to have the Winter Olympics in that city. You just wonder if that could all be tied together somewhere down the road. Again, not anything I would expect to be resolved or announced during these meetings, but you can start to see where the situation that might lead a team there is. And look, I mean, no one wants to hear about this anymore because it has been discussed ad nauseum for 15 years. But we are sitting here right now where the Arizona Coyotes are still playing out of a college rink, and they're trying to secure plans to build their own NHL size arena. And the expectation was that would be finalized, like those plans, somewhere in the new year. And that if they weren't, I think we're starting to get into contingencies like, could they be moved? Is there other cities out there? Obviously, Salt Lake has been mentioned as a possibility for that. Should the Coyotes have to be moved? And so, I know that the amount of talk about a Coyotes arena, probably everyone's ears turn off, but that is actually something that has to be resolved in the near future. And so hopefully we'll get some clarity there. The other thing I should mention too, is this is usually where we get a clear idea of the salary cap for next season. Basically, they've got the first quarter of the season's revenue data in the books now and can, I think, project where they're going. And, that's something that the hockey people at this meeting, I mean, obviously a lot of business people from organizations are here, but any hockey people usually want to hear that because, it affects some of the decisions they're contemplating with players.
All right. That is a lot that could happen on the docket. I love the idea of you being in the unknown for the BOG. But we'll be there to talk about it on Thursday if anything crazy arises. So enjoy your time in Seattle as long as you have to be there. You're gonna be there the whole week.
No, I'm flying back Wednesday, so it's a pretty
Okay.
quick trip. And it's only my second time here. I've actually never been for a Kraken game yet, and I'm
Me
not going to
neither.
see one. Unfortunately, the Kraken are on the road this week. That was the only kind of weird thing. I was like, if you're bringing it here, why wouldn't you have it lined up with a game? You could have had all the owners at a game in a suite or something. But anyway, easier for me to sit there and second guess that. But I'm not going to get into Climate Pledge Arena this time, but I will be back at some point.
Awesome. Let's get to Ask CJ. Thank you to everyone who submitted questions for his mailbag, or anyone who has ever sent in questions, whether on Twitter or on Discord. There are a few that we can get to through the mailbag call out on The Athletic, so we'll delve into that mailbag. I'd like to start with this one from Curtis H. Since you mentioned him, there seems to be a lot of smoke around Patrick Kane right now, but I haven't heard much about Phil Kessel. Is it his intention to play this year? And if so, what timeline should we expect for him?
I think it's tough to place a timeline on it because, Phil has wanted to return the whole time. And so, he was reluctant to go to a team's training camp on a tryout agreement. So he didn't end up doing that. But, he's continued to skate. He's living in Arizona and keep himself game ready. I know there's been discussions and some ongoing discussions with teams, even to a point where there was one stage in October where it looked very close, like he was going to get a contract. That obviously didn't happen. And so, you do wonder, as the weeks become months, is it all done for him? I mean, in his mind and heart, he hopes not. And so it's going to take one team that's serious enough to give him a chance. He is actually still technically the NHL's active Iron Man. He hasn't missed a game yet because he's not under contract to anybody. But, I do know that it's not so important for him to keep that streak going. I mean, I think he's just looking to sign somewhere and keep playing. And if that team wants to, not dress him on back-to-back nights or have him kind of as an extra forward, I think he's open to some of those opportunities. And so, I guess only time will tell if Phil Kessel is going to be back in the NHL, but certainly it's his desire to get back there. And, we've seen players miss a whole year and come back. I remember Brian Boyle did that late in his career. Eric Stahl has done it. So I'm not closing the book on Phil Kessel just yet because the guy still seems to love the game. And I know he's been a very popular teammate most of the places he's been playing. And, he still had 40 points last year? Maybe not quite that many. Yeah, he put up some decent offensive numbers for the amount he played last year in Vegas and helped that team win another cup.
Phil Kessel had 36 points. He was close to 40. You're right.
Right. And so I think as a team that might need a power play shooter, you have to be using him in a certain way. I still think that he's got something to give. So, I think he'll be back. But I would have, if we had this question a month ago, I would have been feeling more certain because back then it seemed like there was a little bit of a push to get something done. And now another month has passed and he's not signed, and it's just harder and harder to imagine him jumping in midstream.
Okay. From John P. I think people are getting hung up on the wrong Swedish superstar's contract negotiation. What does it take for the Canucks to lock up Elias Pettersson up?
Well, I mean, I get the shade being thrown at all the discussion is about William Nylander. I think the difference is but I'll say this. The difference is that William Nylander is an unrestricted free agent on July 1st, meaning if the Leafs don't have a new deal with him, he hits the open market, anyone can sign him. Elias Pettersson has one more RFA year, even though his contract's up. Obviously, someone could offer sheet him or something could happen, but I mean, it's not being discussed with the same urgency because it's not the same situation. But I do think it's interesting timing. I mean, first of all, Pettersson's had a great start to the season. He's coming off 100+ points last year. So, I mean, his career is trending in a great direction for someone needing a contract. And I'll be curious to see how he uses that year. Because, I know that there's been some smoke and discussion about how, that maybe some of the talks have picked up with his camp and the Canucks. I don't know that he feels the pressure necessarily to have to reach a deal right now. Because at the absolute worst, Julian, he could just play out this year, take his qualifying offer, which is $8.8 million for next season, give or take, and then become a UFA. He could also go to arbitration this summer, which is not necessarily the best process for player and team, but maybe an arbitrator awards him even more than an 8.8. And ultimately, we're sitting here, as I'm saying, in Seattle, and I'm wondering about the salary cap. The longer this goes along, the more clarity we get on where the cap's going. I mean, I'm sure he's not going to be arguing to get the same salary as player X. He's going to be arguing to get the same percentage of the cap as player X. And that percentage of the cap, when the cap goes up, means a higher number. And so I think he has a tremendous amount of leverage here, built on the fact that he's coming off a great season. He's having a great season. The Canucks themselves are enjoying success. I think the team's under a lot of pressure to try to sign him and to wrap it up as soon as possible. But, I think he's comfortable kind of slow playing things if the team isn't compelling him to sign, because all of those factors I just mentioned point to him becoming one of the highest paid players in the league, on his next deal. I think that's very likely. I can't say what number it's going to take to get him done, but it's going to be 8 figures, meaning north of $10 million on the AAV. And it's probably, if he's staying in Vancouver, is going to be an 8-year contract. And as I mentioned, he has the option to maybe play on a 1-year deal, one more before that point in time. But the player has the leverage here. That's what happens once you get to your 7 professional seasons. And if you're a top player, the team's in a really difficult position to sign you, and you can almost name your number. And I think that's kind of the territory that Pettersson's trending towards.
Elias Pettersson deserves the bag. He deserves the bag. He's been having a baller year. Those Vancouver Canucks are having a baller year right now. JT Miller and Quinn Hughes and Pettersson still among these scoring leaders. Like, between the Canucks or somebody else, he's going to get the bag, and he deserves it. He's an incredible player.
And I don't think we should predict he's leaving Vancouver. I don't think that at all. But there's a certain dynamic. It's kind of like Nylander, honestly, because I've been pretty consistent. I think he's going to stay in Toronto, but there's a dynamic at play in the negotiation where Nylander is in no rush to sign a contract that he thinks is less than his value, because there's more pressure getting shifted to the team the closer we get to the trade deadline to July 1st. And so, this is what I mean. When you get to that 7th professional season, which is when you get full rights to go sign with anybody else, and if you're a top player in the league or having a great year, I mean, that all the heat is on the GM trying to get you to sign a contract.
Okay. From K-Town 2272 on Discord, where will Shohei Ohtani land?
Oh, man. Toronto. Toronto.
The prayer emoji, the prayer hands have been pulled out, ladies and gentlemen, for Shohei Ohtani. For those who are not watching on video,
I was really hopeful Shohei was going to sign with the Jays when he first came from Japan, and because they were in the mix at that point in time. And I just would love to see this guy play for my favorite team. So I don't have any inside knowledge. I was trolling on Twitter there the other day, if anyone saw me tweet about it. But just the fact that they're being mentioned among the potentially 2, 3, or 4 teams, depending which report you're looking at, that are in the mix. I mean, it's almost, I'm prepared to be hurt again, because the Jays seem to get linked to like big free agents every year and then end up somewhere below the top name. But I'm just hoping it can be Toronto. That would be tremendous.
What about Juan Soto? I mean, there's a possibility you could get him too.
There is. I'm a little less excited about that because, he's 1 year from free agency. Would it just be for one season? What are you giving up to get one season of Juan Soto? I mean, look, if it ends up being Juan Soto, I'm not going to be complaining. I'll be damn excited to watch him, play for the Jays. But I just love the idea of signing Ohtani to like a 4-year deal or something, massive money, because I also think that puts a lot of pressure on ownership to keep building a great team around him. And I want the Jays to extend this window. Like there's some question, right? The Jays they were a team that was on the rise, and they certainly haven't hit a peak yet. But you're like, we're not that long off of like, what do they do with Vladdy's next contract? They signed Bichette to a 2-year deal, but he's gonna be getting the bag after that. And so, you could just see that this might not be a team that's trending towards being competing for a World Series. But I think if you sign Ohtani, that's a pretty clear statement of intent that you're going to be all in on trying to win. And I think that would just be tremendous. So they're putting a new renovation again this winter at the Rogers Center. So they're investing money in there. They probably want to make sure there's lots of fans in the building to justify those expenses. So double down, Rogers, and get Ohtani.
You heard that from CJ, everybody. He
Bring
wants
me
that to happen.
Otani.
Bring me Otani, he says. We're at a point now where if it comes to a point where we have to talk about Otani or Soto signing and it's announced during the show, we have been given the green light by our bosses to do so. Just
well, thank you for including that question. I like that.
From Congo Red, this is more of a journalistic question. If you have a story, someone goes off the record with you and you can't confirm, how do you ensure you don't reveal anything about it?
Well, you just don't say it, right? I mean, I'm just trying to like think this through. Like, there's lots of things I hear off the record that I just would never say on this podcast or put in writing because it isn't confirmed, and you know, it's either something that's meant to be kept secret and it's just context, or it's something I can't prove is true. And so I think the easiest way to do that is you don't talk about it, you don't write about it, you know, like we're doing that all the time. Like it becomes a natural function of our job. So that's why it's almost why I didn't have an answer right away, because it's just like, this is just how it is. I mean, people are telling us things all the time. And then you gotta separate fact from fiction, and that you can prove, you end up reporting on.
All right. And that's going to do it for Ask CJ on this here Monday. And that's going to do it for the CJ show on this Monday as well. And we'll be back on Thursday with a brand new episode. CJ should be back from Seattle by then. We'll have stick taps and other news and notes around the National Hockey League. Subscribe to the SDPN YouTube page. Subscribe to our podcast, whether you listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, even Amazon Music, or whatever podcast catcher you have. Just subscribe to us and leave us a like or rating, or however else you can show your love to this great and fantastic show. Any other final thoughts before we get out of here, Siege?
That's good, man. Nice tight show today. Remember, once upon a time, we were going to be a 30-minute podcast. Today we came close.
That was never going to happen. It was never going to happen. You have too
much. That's how Adam Wilde envisioned this.
It was never going to happen. There was no way we're going to keep it to 30 minutes with all the information that you have.
Well, I was going to say, and with your verbose, you're a great host.
I do okay. I said Elias Peterson earlier. I'm going to think about that all day. That's okay. Hey, I know it's Elias Peterson. It happens.
It does happen. I didn't even correct you because I just figured it was a slip.
I know it was a slip. It's okay. Anyways, we'll be back on Thursday. For CJ, I'm Julian. So long and peace.
The Chris Johnston Show.
Powered by Sports Interaction, your homegrown sportsbook. Always remember to bet local.
Inside the game, twice a week. Follow Chris on Twitter @ReporterChris. And follow Julian McKenzie @JK McKenzie.
The Chris Johnston Show.